So yeah, I'm Anna Jones and I am the team leader for Early Years Foundation Stage Policy at the DfE. And we're really pleased to have the opportunity to talk today about assessment under the new EYFS. So I'm going to start by sharing some important information about the new EYFSP and just signposting to some other resources that we've posted. And then at the end, I did just want to do some myth busting as well, in response to some of the questions that we know a lot of teachers are asking and potentially being asked by their senior leaders. And as Jill said, we've got a bit of time for some Q&A at the end as well, which we'll do our best to answer. So in terms of signposting, so on this slide, hopefully you can see some links to some resources that we've published for teachers ahead of the first statutory EYFSP assessment that will take place this summer term. And this side signpost to them. So please do use them in conjunction with all of the information that I'm going to give today. And hopefully all of that together will make sure that you're confident and well informed ahead of going into the assessment period. So the first link is to the case study exemplification videos that we've already touched upon today. So anyone who's looked at those already will see that we've taken a completely new approach to exemplification materials under the new EYFS, and that has been a very deliberate decision, and it's to reflect the change in assessment expectations going forward. So hopefully, as you'll all have heard, one of the main messages of the reforms is that it isn't necessary to collect evidence or to keep creating big profile books to support the assessment at the end of the year. And we have heard, and we do know, that the former written materials in that format were one of the things that were really contributing to that perception. So instead of replacing those, we've provided examples of teachers discussing individual children in their class, and doing that holistically and just describing things that they've seen through their teaching and through their interactions with that child, and talking about why that's made them confident that the child is meeting or not yet meeting the expected level. So we do hope that the videos really exemplify the importance of just getting to know the children, and using that to plan what you want them to know, and then delivering a high quality curriculum on the basis of that information. We have published a context note on gov.uk alongside the videos that is really important in just setting out how they should be used and how they shouldn't be used, and just putting them into the context of the wider reforms. So we'd really encourage anyone to read that kind of before watching the videos, and just making sure that you're really familiar with that. There's a lot of stuff kind of set out in that context note, but I would just like to really stress that the videos aren't designed to be something like a curriculum planning resource, or to set out a really exhaustive list of approaches that you might take when making your judgments. And we definitely don't expect schools to be replicating them and having conversations like that for every single child, or to be recording those discussions in any way. Alongside the videos, we've also published a vodcast that does summarise the changes to the EYFS reforms more generally, and then goes into the EYFSP more specifically as well. So that vodcast is designed for reception teachers, but it's designed for school leaders as well. So we'd really encourage kind of any EYFS leads to be getting their school leadership to watch that as well, because we do think there's a lot of important messages in there from the DfE that we'd like everyone to be aware of. I'm not going to repeat all of the details provided in that vodcast today, so I would suggest that everyone takes a bit of time to watch it if you haven't already. It's around 20 minutes long, so kind of not too long, and it does include some helpful information. And then finally, there's a link there to the EYFSP Handbook 2022. And again, we'd really recommend that everyone takes the time to look through that and really familiarise yourselves with that. Obviously, I'm aware that we publish a handbook every year, but the 2022 version looks really different to previous versions, and really does kind of reflect all of the changes that we've brought in. And it sets out all of the requirements for teachers with regard to the assessment. So it's a really important document. If we could move to the next slide, Tarek. Thank you. So we thought it'd just be helpful to do a bit of a recap on assessment under the new EYFS, and I think a lot of this isn't new with regard to what the EYFS framework actually says, but we are really seeing the reforms as a good opportunity to be reiterating some of these messages and just kind of really reflecting on practice, and taking them as an opportunity to review that. And it was really good to see in the Mentimeter earlier that it sounds like a lot of people have really taken that opportunity and are having a positive experience so far. So in terms of what assessment should look like, so the new framework and the new handbook are both really clear that it should be formative and ongoing. It should shape teaching, so assessment should be considering have children learned and are they secure in their learning and what you've taught them, and if not, what do you need to put in place to kind of support them, and it should always be proportionate as well. So that kind of brings me on to what it shouldn't look like. So it shouldn't require excessive time away from interacting with and teaching children, and it shouldn't involve excessive tracking kind of throughout the year, which brings us back to that point in terms of being proportionate and just really having a purpose in terms of teaching and what you do with children. So we do know that tracking and recording achievement against the ELGs throughout reception year, and in some cases even before that as well, is something that is quite widespread. It isn't a requirement of the EYFS and it hasn't ever been. And there's no expectation at all to be tracking children against the ELGs until the end of reception year. We do appreciate that isn't always the teacher's choice to track their children in that way, and a lot of that might be coming from requirements from school leaders or from governors or potentially trust leaders who might not have a really good kind of understanding of the EYFS itself. So I would say to anyone, if you are being asked to continue to do that, kind of show them some of the resources that we've signposted to today and just be really clear on what both DfE and Ofsted messages are in this area. If you could move to the next slide, Tarek. So just to move on to talk more specifically about the EYFSP, so rather than assessment more broadly, there are a few things on here that just set out some really key messages that we want everyone to take away with them. So first of all, it's really important to understand that the EYFSP is a snapshot assessment at the end of reception year, just to capture what a child can do at the end of reception and just aid that transition to year one. And anything around the EYFSP that isn't sort of supporting that main aim, it is not a requirement for teachers to be doing. So that obviously includes collecting evidence to justify that judgment or writing really excessive summaries of judgment where that information isn't particularly useful for kind of supporting an individual child's transition to year one. I've already covered the point about not tracking throughout the year, so it's the expected level of development at the end of reception year. It isn't the expected level of development that children are kind of achieving that beforehand. Another point we want to get across is that the new ELGs are very deliberately clearer and a lot more specific, and they really are kind of all that you need to make your judgment at the end of the year. So please don't kind of create any additional requirements for any of the goals that you'd kind of expect the children to be doing if they're not set out in the goal themselves, and do just get to know the children so you can be really confident in that assessment against the specific requirements that are set out. The handbook is really clear on this, but the best fit approach should be used, and that does really give teachers the space to be using professional judgment to determine whether a child's level of development sort of best fits the descriptor that is set out in the ELG. So they are kind of bullet pointed in the new framework, but that really is just for clarity. And we're definitely not suggesting that to meet the expected level of development, a child is expected to have kind of equal mastery of all three bullet points under the ELG. And we do really encourage teachers to use it holistically and just judge whether they think the child is at that expected level or beyond, or whether their best fit judgment is that the child is still emerging against the ELG as a whole, and that that's important information to be passed on to the year one teacher. So we've talked about this already, but for more details on how to administer the EYFSP, again, just really encourage everyone to look at the handbook, because that includes all of the information in terms of what you have to do, and it also goes through requirements like submitting data to the local authority and by when. Next slide, please, Tarek. Thank you. So yeah, we do obviously know that a lot of this will be a big shift in practice across the sector, and we do know that a lot of people have a lot of questions and might be asked questions by others in their school who aren't kind of working in the EYFS themselves. So we did just want to take a bit of time today to go through some of the things that we've been hearing when we've been talking to colleagues in schools, and just do a bit of myth busting on the things that are coming up the most frequently. And yeah, so we're aware that kind of a lot of information about assessment and ideas are being shared on platforms like social media and potentially across local authority areas. So we do just really want to make sure that everyone kind of has the correct information and the really clear messages around the EYFSP this year. So just to go through, so 2 examples together of the kind of thing that we've been hearing. So one of them, as an example, children can't achieve the writing ELG if they don't write in a full paragraph which has correct punctuation. And similarly, children need to be reading at a specific book band to achieve the reading ELG. So you want to be really clear that both of those statements aren't true. So the new goals are clearer and really specific about what children need to be able to do to meet the expected level. And the ELG is all that you need to make that judgment. It's really important that we're not creating additional expectations that sit outside of that ELG and assessing children against those to make that judgment. So yeah, please do just use the goals. Next slide, please. So another thing that we've touched on briefly, but that I wanted to cover again, was written exemplification materials. So something that we have heard people saying is, as there's no written exemplification materials, we're going to make our own. So I think this is really linked to the myths set out on the previous slide, and we do quite strongly discourage doing this. So we decided not to provide written exemplification very deliberately, and that was because we thought they were contributing to teacher workload, offering a lot less room for professional judgment and that kind of best fit model, and also via exemplification bringing in additional things that teachers feel that they need to assess against that aren't actually set out in those really clear goals themselves. So we do strongly encourage teachers and schools to moderate their judgments through professional discussions with each other, like you can see the schools doing in the exemplification videos. And we think that creating lots of different written materials to sit alongside the EYFSP could potentially be quite confusing and bring in some of these myths about there being additional expectations that you should be looking out for when you're doing the EYFSP. And ultimately could lead to kind of a lot more disparity between areas, which would be kind of quite counterproductive in terms of what written exemplification is for. So another thing to move on to, so we've heard a lot of what evidence should I be collecting for the physical development ELGs. So again, we just want to be really clear that teachers shouldn't collect evidence just for the purposes of demonstrating the judgment that they've made for the physical development ELGs, and really should just be getting to know their children and what they can do to make that judgment. And that same principle applies for all ELGs, in terms of the focus for teachers being getting to know the children and having professional discussions. And if you are asked by anyone to provide physical evidence to justify an EYFSP judgment, again, do point them towards the DfE resources that we've signposted to, and just be really clear that isn't an expectation, and we don't think that it is a good use of teachers' time. And then finally, now that local authority moderation isn't mandatory, I shouldn't talk to anyone about my judgments. So obviously professional dialogue about assessment more generally, and including the EYFSP, is still important, and we do continue to encourage moderation discussions that are collaborative, and improve kind of professional understanding and clarity. So we do think that teachers obviously will still be talking to other teachers and other professionals in the earlier sector, to help with their assessment of children if they find that helpful, but this shouldn't mean being kind of externally checked in terms of the judgments that you've made, or providing kind of physical evidence that you've gathered beyond the knowledge that you've got of the children. So next slide, please, Tarek. Cool. So yeah, I hope that that was useful and sort of in line with what you'd already kind of understood about the reforms and the new assessment, and hopefully kind of put people's mind at rest as well, that if you do know your children, there should be a straightforward process and just a kind of valuable process for the children in your class as well. And yeah, we're very happy to take questions about assessment now as well.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Anna, that's really helpful. So Tarek, you can probably stop sharing those now if you like, and then Anna will appear on the screen. Great stuff, thank you. I'm really aware of time, but we've got a few questions. If you're happy, Anna, that'd be great. I've got one that says, what's available for maintained nursery schools, please? I think that one might have been back to Emma's presentation.
Yeah, so maintained nursery schools are eligible for the early years recovery programmes. Yeah.
Brilliant. And one asking about whether MPQ EYL will be funded.
I think that might be one that we need to take away, unless, sorry, I can see Emma's coming up as well. We don't have the workforce team on the call.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I probably should have said during my presentation, although I covered quite a few elements of the recovery programme, not everybody from those different strands of work are on the call today. So if there's specific questions about the recovery programmes and those strands, we can take those away and make sure we get them put into the FAQ document, just so we're not giving out kind of incorrect information. We just want to make sure we're giving out the right information there.
Perfect, thanks so much, Emma. And yeah, please do keep putting questions in the chat box, because we are going to make an FAQ document afterwards, so please do keep posting them. I've got somebody else that said they wanted to sign up for Nelly, but they had missed the deadline. Will there be any further opportunities?
We'll take that one away as well.
Take that one away.
Yeah.
I think there are probably more around the assessment things for Anna towards the end of the chat, Jill. I don't know if they're helpful while we've got Anna in the hot seat.
We've got so I can see the links have all gone up. I just want to confirm that reading ELG is just as it reads and isn't linked to book bands or phonics scheme, please.
No, and hopefully we confirm that at the end, because that was one of the myths that we talked through. We've heard that a lot, so yeah, we just want to be really clear on that.
I've got one here that says, does collaborative discussions include discussing judgments with a local authority?
If that would be helpful, as in we're kind of aware that there'll be sort of lots of people in local areas that will be able to contribute really helpfully to these kinds of discussions. I think we're really clear in the handbook and the framework that is a decision for individual schools. And if you look at the handbook, you'll see that obviously local authority moderation isn't taking place anymore. And it's no longer a requirement for local authorities to be offering things like agreement trialling every term and that kind of thing. So a lot of the requirements have really been stripped out. And yeah, it's kind of back to schools really in terms of what would be helpful for you.
Great, thank you. Right, so I'll just see if I can quickly pull out a couple more. One that says, just to clarify, is there need for post-it notes and photos of observation to evidence what children have been doing / achieved?
No need for that in terms of the EYFSP. Yeah, we're really clear on that. So just what you know about the children and things that you've seen kind of through your interactions with them.
Brilliant, thank you. And I would like to hear about GLD expectations. Is this still going to, oops, that propped in front of me. Is this still going to be published nationally?
Yeah, so we are still collecting the data, and we will still be doing the standard kind of statistical release that sets out that national picture, and then also broken down by local authority level as well. Obviously, because the data isn't moderated anymore, and there will be a break in kind of what the data looked like before, because we've just got different early learning goals now. Those statistical releases going forward will be really caveated with those points. But yeah, there aren't any plans to stop doing those data releases, because we do think it is still useful to get that kind of overall picture of child development and just kind of see where those trends are.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anna. Great stuff. So if you've got any more questions, please do pop them in the chat box. All the questions and all the comments will be going on to our colleagues in DfE after the events, and we will, like I say, jointly produce an FAQ that we can make sure that everybody gets. So thank you so much, Anna, for your time this afternoon, this evening, wherever we are yet in time. That's been really helpful. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jill.